processed burgers all the time. And I realize they're highly processed and, a lot of them have like 20 ingredients. So I tell patients that but some people say it's healthier to actually have the meat. And I don't know if that's been proven. I don't know how to counsel people or if there's a brand, because it's often when you start to get people to eat healthy and they're busy, they often do the veggie burgers. And if there's a brand like Dr. Prager's or something that looks a little bit better, I don't know if you have any input on that.
Yeah, so I think that it all depends on why are you eating a plant-based burger. If your goal is, you know, global warming and the planet, then I would say any of the plant-based burgers are going to be better than eating meat.
Right, absolutely. Uh-huh.
The other situation where I would say, that's probably true is if you have chronic kidney disease and you are really trying to avoid animal protein because of the
Right,
burden
right,
that it has on the kidneys,
right.
then uh, a low sodium plant based burger is going to be better. In general, I think the less processed kind of bean burgers are
Right.
probably
Dr.
better.
Prager has some. There are
Right.
some that
There's
are
some that are
less
mushroom
processed,
based. The ones that I really worry about are the ones that are very high in saturated fat
like the
because of the
Beyond
addition
Burgers
of
and
palm
stuff.
and coconut oil, like the Beyond Burger or the Impossible Burger.
Right, okay. And then the second question I get a lot of is, I mean, I'm really anti-bacon and I really try to get people to break up with bacon. I tell them no food's forbidden. They can have it once every 2 weeks. But then they come back with a lot of them have been told that Canadian bacon is actually healthier. I don't really, I pretty much just try to have them avoid any type of bacon at all, but I don't know if that's a true story either.
So yeah, so here's the way I would approach that is that there's a couple of different issues with bacon. One is there's a lot of fat in bacon,
Oh,
and
bacon
Canadian
is terrible.
bacon has less fat. But the real problem with bacon and all processed meats are their cancer causing
The
potential.
nitrites, yeah.
Just as we know that smoke causes lung cancer, we know that processed meats cause colon cancer. And that
Right.
includes Canadian bacon, regular bacon, any sausages, and even lunch meats.
Right.
So, from that standpoint, I would say Canadian bacon, pardon me, Canadian bacon isn't any better.
Right. I didn't think so, but I've had patients that have been told this by even dietitians. So it's, you know what I mean? You try to, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem, it all depends on what you're comparing it to, right? If you're
Right.
comparing Canadian bacon to regular bacon, because it has less fat, it's probably a little better. But is it healthy? No.
No, right. Okay. That's very healthy. Those are two questions I get a lot of.
All right. Well, I think we should just start. And so, what I wanted to do was just sort of present a couple of slides for perspective, and then also share some resources that I just found out about that I think are helpful for patients, and then come back to taking more questions. So, um, did the slide advance, Mary Jane?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, good. So, the reason we care about this is because of the epidemic of chronic disease in the US. 60% of Americans have a single chronic disease, 40% have two or more. Uh, Almost 40% will be diagnosed with cancer during their lifetimes. Half of all Americans have cardiovascular disease, and 1 in 3 have prediabetes, and most don't even know it. And what we know is that most of those chronic diseases, why isn't my slide advancing here? Okay, are caused by lifestyle. And the single biggest lifestyle risk is diet. The most important dietary risks are the fact that the American diet is low in fruits, low in nuts and seeds, high in sodium, high in processed meats, low in vegetables, and high in trans fats. And 75% of Americans think they eat healthy, despite evidence to the contrary. This map shows median daily vegetable intake, and the recommendation is 5 to 8 fruits and vegetables a day, and California gets to 1.8. So we think we're eating healthy, but more than 80% of Americans fail to eat the recommended amounts of fruits and vegetables, for just one example. So what are Americans eating? Well, the standard American diet is 63% processed foods, and most of that is highly processed foods. 25% is animal products, and only 12% are fruits, vegetables, and whole grains. And really, the goal should be turning that on its head. The healthiest diet is a diet that's predominantly unprocessed foods, plant-based, that are full of fiber and very nutrient dense. What do we mean by whole foods versus processed foods? Well, whole foods are close to the state that they were grown in. You'll know they're whole foods because they spoil faster. They're things that your great-grandparents would recognize as food. They don't have a list of ingredient because the ingredient is broccoli or the ingredient is rice. They're often sold without packaging, like produce in the store, and they tend to be found at the perimeter of the grocery store. In contrast, the foods that are highly processed that aren't healthy, they don't look very much like the state they grew in. They don't spoil easily because of all the food additives that have been added in. Your great-grandparents would not necessarily recognize them as food. They usually have a long list of ingredients, and often things that the ingredients are not things that you would recognize as food. They tend to be packaged or boxed and found in the center of the grocery store. So Michael Pollan, distilled it down to a couple of key concepts in his book, Food Rules, and I think the two most important are these. Eat whole, meaning unprocessed food, not too much, mostly plants. And if it came from a plant, eat it. If it was made in a plant, don't. And if you follow those rules and are otherwise generally healthy, you'll be doing better than 80 to 90% of Americans from a dietary standpoint. When it comes to chronic disease, the good news is most of the chronic diseases are caused by poor diets, but if a poor diet caused the problem, a healthy diet can correct the problem. And we find that in cardiovascular disease, chronic kidney disease, diabetes, heart disease, and a lot of other chronic diseases as well. If you want to learn about this, I just want to remind you that there is a free CME opportunity for any healthcare providers, 3 hours that introduces lifestyle medicine and also talks about nutrition for prevention and longevity, as well as nutrition for treatment and risk reduction. If you scan the QR code, it'll take you to where you can order it. It'll say it's $200, but if you put in the ESS-GW23 code, you'll get it for free. So I'll pause to see if there are any questions, and then there are a couple of other resources I wanted to share with you. Any questions at this point? All right, well, let me share another resource that I think is going to be helpful for most of our patients. And that's what to look for in a food label. And this kind of breaks it down. We want foods that are high in fiber. So if you find foods that have more than 3 grams of fiber per serving, that's going to be a higher fiber food. When you look at the sugar, it's broken down into total sugar and added sugar. And it's really the added sugars that you worry about. Total sugar is sugar that naturally occurs in the food and is bound to fiber and other phytonutrients and is really not what we worry about. But if the added sugar is over 5 grams of sugar per serving, that's high sugar. And so you want to stay away from that. To determine if something is high in sodium, the best thing to do is look at the calories first. And the calories are given in calories per serving. If the milligrams of sodium per serving are higher than the calories per serving, that's a high sodium food. Now, that doesn't mean you can't ever eat a high sodium food. You need to look at it in the context of whatever else you're eating that day. If everything else that you're eating is whole foods cooked from scratch, then a high sodium sauce or sriracha or hot sauce is absolutely fine. When it comes to fat, you want to avoid certain kinds of bad fats. The worst is trans fat, and the second worst is saturated fat. And the fats that are healthy are monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fat. And in general, you want to try to limit fat to less than 3 grams per serving. When you look at the ingredients, fewer is better. So, the least processed foods are going to have one ingredient. They're going to be completely unprocessed. But a little bit of processing isn't bad, and a few ingredients, ideally under 5, is absolutely fine. They should all be things that you recognize as food. So guar gum and monosodium glutamate and polysorbate 80 would not be ingredients that you recognize as food. When it comes to grains, a lot of things are advertising themselves as whole wheat and things like that. But if the word whole does not appear before the word wheat on the ingredients list, then it's not really whole wheat. So the first ingredient should be whole wheat or whole rye or whole oats. Otherwise, it's mostly refined flour, and they put some whole grains in just so that they can say there's whole grains. And finally, you want to avoid added fructose. Now, this is a lot to remember, and Giant Food has put together, and also some other collaborating food stores, I think Aldi and Food Lion are part of this. They put together the Guiding Stars program. And the idea here is that Guiding Stars reads the nutrition facts panel so you don't have to. So they look at the food labels and the ingredients, and they give anywhere from 0 to 3 stars based on things that are positive factors, have more vitamins, minerals, fiber, whole grains, and omega-3s, and less saturated fat, trans fat, added sodium, added sugars, and artificial colors. And these appear on the shelf tags right next to the prices, anywhere from 1 to 3 stars. If you're ordering online, they're on the sorter. You can sort by only things that are a higher star number. And they also appear in recipes. And there's an app. So if you're at Giant or Food Lion, you can find them actually on the shelves. But if you are shopping at Whole Foods, you can look it up in the app. Now, the downside of the app in Whole Foods is it doesn't include any of the Whole Foods store brands, but all the national brands are in here as well. So this app is particularly helpful if you are trying to figure out, okay, I want to buy bread. There's 5 different whole wheat breads on the shelf. I don't have time to really look at the food labels and figure out which is the healthiest. Pick the one that has the more guiding stars, and you'll know that they've looked at the food label for you. So that's all I wanted to present today, but I'm happy to take questions. I think, note to self, next time we need to advertise this better. The QR code on this slide links to some lifestyle medicine resources that we have at the GWMFA. There's resources around healthy eating, physical activity, restorative sleep, and then also how to cut down on alcohol and how to stop smoking. Any other niggling questions, Mary Jane, that come up with your patients?
Um, I often get asked a lot about protein, and whether vegetable-based proteins will give them the same amount of protein or how much protein a day. And there's a lot of confusion in the literature. Like if you look at the New York Times, they'll tell you there's an article just recently that said people should have 100 grams of protein a day. It wasn't written by a dietitian, but it's supposed to be 1 gram per kilogram of ideal body weight. But it hasn't really been researched that well. So I get a lot of questions about diet, exercise, and how much protein they should have if they're trying to lose weight. A lot of people are told to keep your carbs under 100 grams and keep your protein at 100 grams, but I think that's a lot of protein, and it's a lot of protein load for the kidney. So that's the question I get a lot, is how much protein should I have? And unfortunately, it hasn't really been researched that well, but I go with a 1 gram, that's what the dietitians go with, 1 gram per kilogram of ideal body weight. So just there.
Yeah, so the way I think about protein, let me start by saying that everybody worries about protein, but really most Americans are not deficient in protein. What they're deficient in is fiber.
Right, absolutely.
So, the more important question is not where will you get your protein, but where will you get your fiber? I mean, people should be
Right,
shooting
right.
for, 28 to 40 grams of fiber a day, and most people are falling very, very short of that. So for protein, in order to think about protein, I think it's important to think about what are your goals, okay? There were studies that were done looking just at nitrogen balance, and those studies are often cited 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight per day. I think that's kind of a floor. Um, that's the minimum that you want to get, and I think there are situations where you would want to get more than that, and I would say there's sort of two situations. If you're over 50, you're going to be absorbing protein less well,
Mhm.
and you want to increase um, anywhere. Usually, I say 1 gram per kilogram per day if you're over 50, and then another step up if you are trying to build muscle and not just shooting for maintenance. So if you're doing resistance training and taking in enough calories that you're building muscle, you also need to get enough protein. Um, and for someone who is under 50, that's probably anywhere from 1 to 1.7 grams per kilogram per day, which comes out for, I just did this calculation today for a 128-pound woman, and that comes out to close to 100 grams of protein a day. But that's someone who's actively trying to build muscle. Um, if you are over 50 and actively trying to build muscle, you're going to be looking at 1.7 to even 2 grams of protein a day, which can be challenging. You really need to be intentional in that setting. Everybody thinks about protein and muscle, and it's important to remember that the most important thing that you need to build muscle is progressive resistance on the muscle. So you can eat all the protein you want, but if you're not actually pushing the muscle to fatigue and making the muscle work harder, you're not going to build muscle.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, so that's sort of the way I would think about it. And I guess the next question is, what source of protein. And the way I think about that is, what does the protein come with? You know, the downside, the advantage to animal protein is it's very concentrated. The downside to animal protein is it comes with a lot of saturated fat. Plant proteins are less concentrated, so you need to eat more plants to get the same amount of protein, or do a plant-based protein supplement. But they don't come with saturated fat. They tend to come with other very healthy nutrients. So plant proteins tend to be more nutrient dense, while animal proteins tend to be more calorie dense.
The other thing I see a lot over in the clinic is patients that have kidney disease, and they think that you can't have anything that has potassium in it. So I try to really relay that myth. They've been told to
Yeah,
avoid
so
potassium foods, and so you can comment on that too.
so when we think about chronic kidney disease, and I would say we start to think about this when someone's estimated glomerular filtration rate is less than 60 milliliters per minute. And for perspective, when everybody was a teenager, they were probably around 120. So when you fall to half of what you had as a teenager, that's when we start to get concerned. And the other reason that we get concerned at 60 is that below 60, the slope of decline tends to be faster if you're not taking steps to control it. So what are the things that drive chronic kidney disease? Well, uncontrolled blood pressure, uncontrolled diabetes, diets that are too high in sodium, all lead to chronic kidney disease. Certain medications, the most common of which would be painkillers, so anti-inflammatories like Advil or Aleve or ibuprofen, those sorts of things. So controlling your blood pressure, controlling your diabetes, and avoiding non-steroidal anti-inflammatory painkillers will help prevent further progression of chronic kidney disease. But the only thing that has ever been shown to actually improve the EGFR is switching from plant-based protein to switching from animal protein to plant-based protein. The reason that works is the building blocks of protein are amino acids, and the particular set of amino acids that are in higher concentrations in animal proteins create a higher acid load for the kidney, and they make the kidney work harder compared to the particular amino acids that are concentrated in plant proteins. So the most important thing you can do with diet is from a kidney health standpoint, is eat a low sodium diet and switch from animal to plant proteins. If your kidney function is between 30 and 60, for the most part, you don't need to worry about potassium at all. Everybody will be different, so it's important to monitor that periodically. When you get below 30, sometimes people can have a problem monitoring potassium. The studies that have been done on this, though, have shown that the concerns over potassium in diet are overinflated, that there's really not as much risk as people think. What I tell people to avoid is, and the reason that this is a discussion is that most of the plant foods are the foods that are higher in potassium. So you want to avoid any potassium salts, like salt substitutes. Those are going to be a bad thing. The other thing that I would avoid if you're worried about potassium are fruit juices, jellies, and dried fruits, because in all of those situations, the water has been taken out and the potassium has been concentrated. But eating fresh fruits and vegetables are almost, it's very rare that they would cause a problem. If someone is really, really sensitive, staying away from potatoes might be necessary. But for the vast majority of patients, if they avoid fruit juices, jams and jellies, and dried fruit, they're not going to run into a problem. And for the patients who can't tolerate fruits and vegetables, the kidney doctors will actually put them on medicine to lower their potassium so that they can continue to eat the fruits and vegetables because it's so helpful to the recovery and preservation of kidney function. Long answer, but I hope that answered your question.
Excuse me, Dr. Moore, I think you're muted yourself.
Brad, I'm so sorry to interrupt. I can't hear you all of a sudden.
Sorry. Should I start over with the guiding stars?
Yes, please.
Okay, sorry. So the Guiding Stars program was started by a consortium of grocers on the East Coast, Giant of Pennsylvania, Giant of Maryland and Virginia, Food Lion, and some others. And the idea is they want to help consumers, when they're in the grocery store, make healthier choices. And it's also guiding what foods they put on the end caps and try to emphasize as well. And their slogan is Guiding Stars reads the nutrition facts panel so you don't have to. What they do is they analyze the nutrition facts panel and the ingredients for foods, packaged foods, and they give them anywhere from 0 to 3 stars. And what you get points if you are high in vitamins, minerals, fiber, whole grains, and omega-3s, and you lose points if you are high in saturated fat, trans fat, added sodium, added sugar, and artificial colors. And the way you can find this information is, first of all, if you're in one of the participating stores, just looking at the shelf tags. Right next to the price, if they have healthy stars, they're going to have a little icon that gives 1 to 3 stars. They don't give you an icon with 0 stars, although you can see that in the app to know that it's been analyzed and that it has lost stars, and they actually tell you why. If you're ordering online, you can sort by number of stars, and there's an app that you can scan the QR code, and it'll tell you what the stars are. And it gives you, if you look at the right-hand side here, Cheerios gets points for fiber, vitamins, minerals, and whole grains, but it loses points for added sodium and added sugar. Now, it doesn't have a lot of added sodium and a lot of added sugar, so it still gets 2 stars. But that's how they came up with the rating. So this is helpful to tell patients about, and it's helpful to, as you're thinking, if you're thinking about buying crackers or any particular product and you want to see what the healthiest choices would be, it's easy to scan that in the app. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, well, I want to thank everybody for coming. I think we will try to do this again in the fall and advertise it a little better. And you can all stop me in the hallway if you have any questions.